Have you ever felt, in the silence of a seemingly ordinary night, the sudden sensation that someone is watching you, not with fear, but with a strange tenderness, as if an invisible presence were trying to touch your shoulder and say, "I'm here"? Perhaps it was a forgotten perfume that lingered in the air, or an old song appearing without explanation, exactly at the moment you were thinking of someone who had passed away. Most people ignore these moments, calling them coincidences or tricks of the grieving mind. But what if they aren't? What if every sign, every whisper, and every dream is, in fact, a call, a cry for help from someone still trying to cross the boundaries between worlds? Carl Jung said that the unconscious is a bridge, not an abyss, a secret passage where the living and the dead meet, exchanging symbols instead of words. Perhaps then what we call spirit is not outside, but inside, an extension of the psyche, trying to complete what was left incomplete. Death does not interrupt, it transforms. And it is precisely in this transformation that many are lost. Imagine for a moment that the soul, upon detaching itself from the body, still carries the memory of time, the weight of promises, the echo of unhealed pains. It awakens in a space that is neither heaven nor earth, but something in between, a kind of twilight of consciousness. Jung called this transitional state the night of the soul, the territory where forms dissolve and only the essential remains. On this threshold, many do not recognize that they have already departed. They try to speak to us through the language of symbols, the touch of a breeze, the sudden flash of light, the recurring dream with the same gaze. Each manifestation is an attempt at reconnection, a coded message asking us to listen to them, to recognize them, for the forgotten soul begins to disappear, not for lack of time, but for lack of memory. It is the forgetfulness of the living that condemns the dead to solitude. There is something cruel and sublime in this idea. Think of someone you loved and lost. Think of their voice, their gestures, the way that person made you feel. Now imagine that, while you try to move on, that same presence wanders in a suspended space, searching for a sign that they are still remembered. The love you feel may be the only remaining bridge between worlds. And perhaps that is what life tries to tell us when certain signs insist on returning, when certain places seem to breathe memories. Jung taught us that the human psyche has no rigid boundaries. It is permeable, elastic, capable of touching dimensions that escape common logic. Thus, when we feel the call of the dead, it is not the supernatural that approaches. It is the collective unconscious moving, inviting us to decipher a symbol that transcends time. The lost soul is not a literal ghost, but a part of the very spiritual fabric of humanity, trying to rediscover meaning. And if we ignore these calls, something within us is also lost. For whoever refuses dialogue with the invisible ends up denying the mystery that sustains it. Some people report dreams so vivid that they wake up in tears, feeling as if they have reunited with a loved one. Others say they have felt a presence at the edge of their bed, a serene shadow that inspires not fear, but compassion. This is no coincidence. These are ways in which the unconscious communicates what the rational mind rejects. Jung stated that the symbol is the secret language of the soul, and it is in this language that the dead call to us. They do not speak with voices, but with sensations, coincidences, and images. And the more we resist listening, the more intense these manifestations become, until we finally understand that it is not a haunting, but a memory. There is something that needs to be said clearly. Forgetting is a second death. When someone disappears from the field of our memory, what is extinguished is not just a memory, but the vital force that linked two consciousnesses. Jung saw love as a psychic energy capable of traversing worlds, and that is why it never truly dies out. It only changes form. Even when the body disintegrates, the connection persists in the unconscious. Thus, every time you feel longing, you are participating in an invisible ritual, a symbolic reunion between two poles of the same soul. But there is a danger. When the modern mind rejects mystery, it closes the doors to dialogue between worlds, and what finds no passage rots in darkness. The unremembered dead wander on the border of being, trapped by the echo of their own identities. It is not hell that holds them, but oblivion. They scream in symbols we no longer know how to read, a window banging without wind, a clock that stops forever at the same time, a bird that insists on landing in the same place. They are fragments of an ancestral language, remnants of a lost communication between the visible and the invisible. Jung said that which does not become conscious returns as destiny. Perhaps lost souls are the destiny of forgotten humanity, a silent reminder that everything we deny in life awaits us on the other side. And when a soul tries to reach us, it is not only to be rescued, but to remind us of what we too have left unfinished. What we call a ghost may simply be a reflection of an unfulfilled promise, of forgiveness not granted, of a farewell that never happened. Think about the times when something inside you asked you to revisit the past, to look at a photograph again, to light a candle for no apparent reason. It's not nostalgia, it's the call of the soul, an attempt at reintegration. Carl Jung believed that every encounter with mystery is, ultimately, an encounter with oneself. Thus, when the invisible touches your life, it is not asking for fear, but for attention, because perhaps the other side is not so far away. Perhaps it exists within the same silent space where thought is formed, where longing transforms into prayer. And then the inevitable question arises: if we can feel those who have gone, can we help them too? Is it possible to offer light to those who have lost their way? The answer will not come from religions or dogmas, but from symbolic experience itself. For if the unconscious is the dwelling place of all times, then to remember is to resurrect. Memory is the golden thread that stitches together dimensions, and each conscious gesture of love is a small beacon lit in the darkness of the beyond. But before we learn to guide a soul, we must understand what happens the instant it detaches from the body. The moment of death is not an end, it is a passage. And according to Jung, this passage is shaped by the state of consciousness in the last breath. Some cross smoothly, guided by acceptance. Others remain trapped between fear and attachment, wandering on a threshold where time does not exist. That is where the true mystery begins, the one that can only be understood when one faces the invisible without trying to dominate it. Perhaps then the right question is not, where are the dead, but where are we in relation to them? Because if the unconscious is the common ground where all souls meet, then there has never been separation, only different forms of presence. The signs we receive are invitations to awaken. The invisible does not want to frighten us. It wants to educate us to see beyond form. And if it's true that the dead are still searching for us, then perhaps we've been the ones who have been absent all along. Perhaps we're the ones who need to wake up. The instant that idea becomes possible, the air changes density, the heart slows, and a profound silence settles in, as if the universe, for a brief second, were breathing through us. And it is in this silence that something begins to move. Something that, from now on, can no longer be ignored. There are nights when the silence seems more alive than sound itself. It is in these moments that something invisible approaches, not to frighten, but to remind. Some say that the air changes, that the temperature fluctuates without reason, that a shiver runs down the skin as if a forgotten name wanted to be remembered. Carl Jung believed that the soul carries the energy of affections, and that when a bond is interrupted by death, this energy field does not disappear. It merely changes form, seeking a new point of contact. That is why sometimes a simple memory can alter the entire environment, making the air dense, vibrant, as if the past were becoming present again. Imagine entering the room of someone who has passed away. Everything is in its place: the portrait, the book, the old perfume that still seems to linger in the air. And suddenly, a nameless sadness takes hold of you, a feeling that isn't exactly pain, but something between longing and expectation. Jung would call this psychic impression, a living memory imbued in the space. The environment retains the emotion, the gesture, the thought, and returns everything in the form of atmosphere. Thus, when we feel the inexplicable weight of a room, perhaps we are touching a presence that is still trying to break free from time. Once, a woman told me that since her father had passed away, the clock in the living room always stopped at 10:14 p.m., the same time he used to arrive home from work. She fixed it, changed the batteries, called technicians, but the hand always stopped at exactly the same minute. At first, she thought it was a coincidence, until one night she dreamed of her father sitting next to the clock, looking at her tenderly. He didn't say anything, just smiled and pointed to the stopped hand. In the dream, she understood the message. He was still trying to get home, still trapped in the habit of a life that no longer existed. The next day, she lit a candle, and looking at the clock said aloud, "Father, the house is at peace, you can rest." The following morning, the clock started working again and never stopped again. These signs are not inventions of the mind. They are coded messages, transmitted through symbolic language that connects the visible and the invisible. Jung said that the symbol is the bridge between the conscious and the unconscious, and perhaps it is through it that the dead still speak to us. They do not speak in words, but in coincidences, in vibrations, in small ruptures in the fabric of daily life. When the radio turns on by itself, when the light always flickers at the same time, when a bird lands on the windowsill and seems to observe silently, perhaps it is not just chance but a reminder that something still needs to be completed. There are accounts that echo this same pattern. One man, for example, lost his wife suddenly and for months smelled a faint jasmine scent whenever he thought of her. The scent appeared in unlikely places, on the subway, in the office, in the middle of any street. One day, determined to understand, he lit a candle and whispered, "If it's you, tell me if you are at peace." That night he dreamed of her walking in a field of white flowers, smiling and saying only, "Now I can go." After that, the scent never appeared again. It wasn't sadness he felt, it was a silent gratitude, the certainty that love had completed its journey. These manifestations occur because, according to Jung, the unconscious is participatory. It doesn't observe the world from the outside, it creates it along with us. The boundary between spirit and matter is merely a matter of perception. When someone dies, the psychic energy that constituted them continues to circulate, seeking integration. And if this energy encounters resistance, whether through attachment, guilt, or fear, it manifests itself symbolically, demanding recognition. This is why places loved by the departed retain a strange vitality. The house, the garden, the favorite object become extensions of a soul seeking redemption. There's a story that always moves me. A young man lost his younger brother in an accident and, ever since, he would hear the sound of the video game turning on by itself in the middle of the night. Always the same time, always the same game. He tried to rationalize it, short circuit, electrical fault, coincidence. But the sound persisted. One night, exhausted, he sat down at the console and spoke as if his brother could hear him. "I know you want to keep playing, but you've already beaten all the levels. You can rest now." At that moment, the screen flickered and the game froze, displaying the word end. The device never turned on by itself again. He cried not from fear, but from relief. Jung would say that by naming the symbol, the unconscious finds resolution, and perhaps that was exactly it. The spirit, finally understood, could continue its journey. What unites us with the dead is the same thing that separates us from them: love. It is love that creates bridges and bonds. A mother can feel her son's presence years after his departure, not because he is trapped, but because she still keeps him alive within herself. And this connection, when illuminated by consciousness, does not imprison, it liberates. Jung believed that the soul only finds peace when it recognizes its own symbols. Therefore, when interpreting these signs with attention and compassion, we are not dealing with ghosts but with fragments of meaning asking for integration. However, there are times when the mystery intensifies. Certain signs bring not comfort, but unease. Recurring dreams in which the deceased appears confused, calling for help, asking for something we cannot understand. Jung saw these dreams as direct messages from the collective unconscious, attempts at reconciliation between worlds. One woman recounted dreaming of her deceased mother standing in the kitchen, stirring an empty pot. Always the same scene, repeated for months, until one day she realized she had never prepared her mother's favorite dish since the funeral. The following Sunday, she decided to cook that recipe. As the aroma spread through the house, she felt a light presence, like a silent blessing. After that, the dream never returned. It was the symbol being deciphered, the link fulfilling its function. What we call supernatural is, perhaps, the profound language of the unconscious attempting to restore balance. The lost soul is not an enemy, but a mirror. It reflects what we have not yet accepted. When we fear these manifestations, it is because something within us fears the very mystery of continuity. Jung said that what we resist persists, and that is why the signs persist until they are recognized. When we finally welcome the presence with love, the phenomenon ceases. Not through exorcism, but through understanding. There is a silent beauty in realizing that the afterlife is not a place, but a state. The boundary that separates the living and the dead is made of perception and emotion. Each tear shed with love is an open portal. Each sincere memory is a thread stretching between the two worlds. Life wants to be remembered, death wants to be understood, and when both unite in the same gesture of awareness, reconciliation comes. Carl Jung saw in this process not a mystical belief, but a profound psychological truth. Every soul desires to become whole, and wholeness is only possible when love overcomes fear, when remembrance overcomes forgetfulness. Thus, helping the dead is in fact helping ourselves. It is recognizing in the other that which in ourselves also seeks expression. There is a moment, however, when the signs cease to be symbolic and become pure presence. When this happens, the air seems to vibrate, time is suspended, and a living silence envelops everything. There is no fear, only a strange certainty that someone is there. It is at this point that the dialogue between worlds truly opens up, not through words, but through an invisible communion, an exchange of energy that transcends the body. And this is where the mystery deepens, because not all who call seek only comfort. Some ask for liberation, others bring messages that forever change the destiny of those who receive them. There are signs that do not cease until the hidden truth is revealed, until a secret comes to light. And that's exactly where the story starts to get dangerous. Because when the invisible decides to be heard, nothing remains the same. There are times when the invisible no longer asks permission to manifest itself. It simply traverses the everyday, dismantling the logic of the possible, and forcing us to look at something we don't understand, but feel with an almost painful clarity. When a sign repeats itself, when the improbable becomes insistent, it's because the veil between worlds has begun to wear away. Jung said that significant coincidences, the so-called synchronicities, these are the ways the unconscious finds to dialogue with reality. They are not random events but symbolic manifestations of a profound need for meaning. And perhaps, at this moment, the entire universe is trying to tell us something that can no longer be contained in silence. A woman once reported that, after her son's death, she began finding small pebbles in unlikely places. Inside her shoe, on her pillow, in her coat pocket, smooth stones, the kind the boy used to collect by the riverbank during his childhood. At first she thought it was a coincidence, until she realized the stones always appeared on the days she felt most guilty for not having been able to save him. Each stone seemed like a silent message. I'm listening to you, don't forget me, don't blame yourself. Jung would say that the symbol is the mediator between worlds. That matter bends to the psyche when there is enough love to move it. But who, after all, would be moving these stones? The child's spirit or the maternal unconscious asking for reconciliation? What if the two things were the same? This is the boundary where rational explanation breaks down. The soul, in its liminal state, finds in the symbol a way to touch the living. What we call a miracle may simply be the reflection of a natural communication between dimensions that coexist within the same psychic field. When we recognize the sign with tenderness, without fear, the energy flow reorganizes itself. The spirit ceases to shout and begins to whisper, and the whisper transforms into understanding. Jung believed that what is accepted by consciousness is transformed. What is denied is repeated. The same happens with the dead. When we deny their calls, they return in new forms until we are able to hear them. But what happens when synchronicities become intense, almost suffocating? When the number repeats itself every day, when the same sound echoes in different places, when the name of the deceased appears on radios, signs, random messages, is it a request or a warning? In one intriguing case, a man began seeing the number 111 everywhere after his wife's death. Car license plates, digital clocks, receipts. In dreams, she would only tell him, "Follow the first path." He interpreted it as a metaphor, and months later, moved to a new city, where he met a therapist who helped him heal the guilt that consumed him. Follow the first path wasn't about geographical destination, but about returning to one's own heart. Her soul wasn't asking for remembrance. It was asking for liberation. Why do some signs seem to grow until they dominate someone's entire life? Is there a line between comfort and imbalance? Jung warned that when the unconscious manifests itself excessively, it is because consciousness has refused to engage in dialogue. The spirit then becomes a mirror of what is repressed. The haunted house is often just a closed mind trying to open itself. A man who ignored the signs of his own pain dreamed several nights of his dead father calling him down to the basement of the old house. He always woke up before he could fulfill the request. One day, he decided to follow the dream to the end. He visited the house, opened the basement door, and found a box with old letters in which his father apologized for absences that were never mentioned in life. Upon reading them, he cried for hours. After that, the dream ceased. Dad no longer needed to be remembered. He needed to be heard. What if the dead were asking not only for love, but for awareness? With each story, the line between the spirit and the unconscious becomes more tenuous. Jung saw the human being as a mediator between worlds, the bearer of the spark that connects the material to the immaterial. When a spirit seeks the help of a living being, perhaps it is only trying to complete an internal process of the human being itself. The lost soul out there is the symbol of the incomplete soul within. To help another to cross over is to cross over oneself. This reciprocity is the true mystery. A young woman, after losing her mother, began to feel inexplicable pain in her hands, the same hands her mother used to sew dresses. No doctor could find a physical cause. Until one day, sitting before her old sewing machine, she decided to turn it on again. She sewed a small handkerchief with her mother's name embroidered in blue. The pain ceased instantly. Jung would explain, the symbolic gesture completes the interrupted cycle. The energy that was suspended finds a new meaning. The daughter not only healed the memory, she gave her mother back a space of continuity. But what if we ignore these impulses? What if we fail to heed this subtle call? The unspoken accumulates. Presence becomes insistence. The invisible transforms into weight. Some describe it as anxiety, others as causeless melancholy. What really happens is that communication between dimensions has been interrupted, and the soul seeks new ways to express itself. Jung called this phenomenon autonomy of the symbol, when a symbol takes on a life of its own and begins to act independently, attempting to force consciousness to awaken. This is why certain spiritual experiences seem invasive. It is not the beyond that pursues us. It is our own unconscious demanding passage. What if every soul that seeks you is, in fact, a part of you trying to get back home? The idea may seem bold, but it makes sense in light of Jungian psychology. The psyche is not limited to the individual. It expands as a collective field where all human experiences coexist. Thus, a soul that asks for help is a facet of the great collective unconscious trying to restore balance. When we respond with compassion, we are not only freeing a spirit, we are healing a dormant portion of humanity. And in doing so, our own soul becomes broader, more lucid, more alive. One night, a therapist recounted that, after years of listening to stories of grief, he himself began to have visions of patients who had already died. They appeared silently, merely observing as if waiting to be remembered. At first, he feared he was going mad. Then he realized that these apparitions ceased whenever a story of forgiveness was concluded in session. The souls seemed to find peace through words. Jung would say that the therapist had become a mediator of the collective unconscious, a modern psychopomp, someone capable of accompanying the symbolic dead towards consciousness. But what happens when the mediator is called upon too often? When the veil becomes so thin that the difference between dream and reality disappears? There is a risk in opening doors to the invisible. Jung warned, he who gazes long into an abyss will be gazed into by it. The same gift that liberates can also imprison. Discernment, balance, and humility are necessary. Not every soul wants help. Some merely reflect our own shadows. Recognizing this is essential to avoid getting lost in the labyrinth of the invisible. Loving listening must be accompanied by clear boundaries, or the weight of souls can become unbearable. Perhaps the true lesson is understanding that death doesn't demand worship, but continuity. It doesn't want us to confine it to rituals, but to transform it into wisdom. Every synchronicity is a reminder we are still connected. Every meaningful coincidence is an invitation to remember that the world is bigger than it seems. Jung called this numinous, the presence of the sacred in every event that escapes our reason. What if the sacred isn't in the beyond, but right here, in the space between what we feel and what we understand? At this point, the mystery ceases to be external. What we previously called signs from beyond becomes part of the language of the awakened soul. It is no longer necessary to wait for the clock to stop, the light to flicker, the dream to repeat itself. Communication becomes internal, silent, serene. The presence of the dead transforms into living wisdom, into a guiding force. When the heart finally understands, the whole world changes frequency. But before this harmony is established, there is one last step, the one in which the soul consciously decides to cross over. And it is at this instant that true contact occurs, not as a vision, nor as a voice, but as an indescribable sensation that everything, absolutely everything, is united. And it is precisely there, at this point of dissolution and revelation, that something unexpected begins to emerge. Because just when we think we've understood the mystery changes shape. And perhaps in the next part, he won't come from outside anymore. Perhaps it comes from within. There is something profoundly human in the inability to leave the world behind. The soul, upon detaching itself from the body, still feels the texture of the walls, the smell of the house, the warmth of the voices that named it. It's as if a part of it remains on its knees before time, refusing to admit that love also needs to learn to let go. Jung said that attachment to matter is the shadow of the spirit. The more the soul fears losing what it loves, the more it becomes confused with what no longer belongs to it. And it is in this confusion that many remain trapped between two worlds, not as punishment but out of an excess of love. A woman once reported that after her mother's death, she would hear the sound of light footsteps in the hallway whenever she approached the kitchen. The pots would clatter on their own, and the smell of coffee would waft even without a lit stove. She believed it was her imagination until, one morning, she found a small note on the table written in her mother's old handwriting. "Don't forget to eat." The paper seemed aged, as if it had traversed time. No relative recognized the object. No friend had been to the house. The woman wept for hours, understanding that the presence was neither malice nor haunting. It was care. Her mother's soul was still trying to nourish her daughter, a prisoner of a love that refused to die. But what happens when love becomes a prison? When the bond, instead of elevating, prevents the crossing? Jung believed that true liberation only happens when love is returned to consciousness, transformed into understanding. While emotion remains raw, it generates shadow, and the shadow seeks expression. Thus are born the houses that cry, the objects that move, the windows that open without wind. These are signs that the feeling has surpassed the limit of form and demands symbolic translation. What if the fear of losing was stronger than the instinct to keep going? A curious case recounted by a therapist showed how attachment can imprison even the purest intentions. A devoted father, after dying suddenly, began to be perceived by his young daughter in dreams. She said that her father came every night to adjust the blanket and sing the same lullaby. The problem was that every morning, the girl woke up exhausted, with deep dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't really slept. The mother, desperate, sought help. Advised to talk to the presence, she lit a candle and said, "You don't need to take care of her like before. Now it's my turn. Go in peace." That night, the girl slept peacefully for the first time in months. The father's love was real, but it was distorted by the fear of leaving. The farewell gesture freed them both. There is a curious aspect to the souls that remain. They do not perceive time as we do. A minute can be equivalent to a century. A century can last the blink of an eye. Jung said that the unconscious does not know time, it simply is. Thus, a soul trapped in guilt can relive the moment of failure indefinitely, trying to fix what can no longer be changed. This repetition is symbolic hell, the circle that is only broken when consciousness accepts looking at the error without punishment. But can regret be so strong as to negate death itself? A middle-aged man reported that for years, he had dreamt of a friend he had betrayed in the past. In the dream, the friend always appeared at the door of a bar, demanding an explanation. Tired of the guilt, the man sought out the grave and spoke aloud what he had never said in life. He cried, asked for forgiveness, promised to change. The following night, he dreamt of his friend again, but this time he was sitting, smiling, with a glass in his hands. "It's over," he said. The dream never returned. Jung would call this shadow integration, the moment when what was pain transforms into awareness. Perhaps forgiveness is the key to all journeying, for the living and the dead alike. What if hell wasn't a place, but a state of mind that we carry with us until the end? There are souls that simply don't cross over because of fear of punishment, fear of emptiness, fear of a God they imagine to be severe. They hide in their own consciousness, like frightened children who have broken something precious and fear being discovered. Jung said that What we fear most is what we most need to know. And that is precisely why fear becomes a prison. It keeps the soul spinning around its own shadow. A report from Europe in the early 20th century describes a striking phenomenon. An entire village claimed to feel a nocturnal presence in the hills. Lights moved on their own and the wind carried a lamenting song. After careful investigation, it was discovered that an ancient monastery, destroyed by war, had stood on that very spot. Documents found in the rubble revealed that the monks believed they had sinned by abandoning the temple during the bombings. The sound people heard was the collective echo of unresolved guilt. When the site was restored and a symbolic ceremony of forgiveness was performed, the sounds ceased. Jung would call this archetypal healing, when a community, upon acknowledging a trauma, restores peace to the consciences that caused it. Why is it so difficult to accept that we are worthy of love, even after death? Perhaps because we have learned to confuse justice with punishment. Souls fear the judgment they have projected, not the one that truly exists. The truth, as Jung taught, is that the unconscious does not condemn, it merely reveals. And what it reveals is the truth of who we were, without masks, without escapes. Judgment, then, does not come from outside, but from the very reflection that refuses to be loved. It is the mirror that the soul avoids facing. There are fascinating accounts of near-death experiences that confirm this perception. People report not encountering a judge, but a loving presence that envelops them in absolute silence. Instead of accusations, there is understanding. Instead of punishment, there is clarity. One woman, after a serious accident, recounted that she reviewed her entire life as if watching a film, but feeling what each person had felt because of her. "I was all of them," she said, "and I realized there was no punishment, only learning." Jung would see in this the manifestation of the self, the deepest instance of the psyche, where good and evil are reconciled. What if true heaven was simply the complete acceptance of who we are? When we understand this, fear dissolves. The soul that was once hidden begins to remember that light does not judge, it only reveals. The universe, Jung said, is sustained by a loving intelligence, and everything that resists this love is merely ignorance. The journey, then, is not a geographical passage but an expansion of consciousness. The soul does not go to another place, it simply awakens. But there is something even deeper. When a soul awakens, the bond with the living also transforms. It doesn't disappear. It becomes pure presence, free from time and form. Some people report feeling this change as a sudden lightness, a breeze entering through the window for no reason. Others say that an old weight dissolves from their chest, and an inexplicable peace occupies the space where there was once pain. This is what Jung called spiritual individuation, the moment when the human and the divine recognize each other as a single flow. Death, then, ceases to be the enemy. It becomes the mirror where life learns to see itself in its entirety. But if all this is true, if love, fear, and guilt shape the destinies of souls, a question arises that can no longer be avoided. To what extent do we, the living, influence what happens after death? And even more, is it possible to interfere in the journey of those who have already departed, guiding them to the light simply through the power of thought and memory? The answer begins to insinuate itself into the air, like an ancient whisper, and what comes next no longer belongs solely to mystery. It belongs to choice, because there are times when understanding the invisible is not enough. It's necessary to act upon it. There are moments when the pain of grief transforms into a kind of silent prayer, as if the soul itself begins to learn a new language. When love refuses to die, it seeks ways to continue being love, even through the invisible. Jung said that every encounter between the living and the dead is, in fact, a reunion of consciousness with the eternal. At this point in the journey, we no longer speak of mystery, but of responsibility. If there are souls trapped on the border between worlds, perhaps we are the missing thread that allows them to find their way back to the light. Imagine lighting a candle, not to call upon something, but to liberate it. The flame dances and for a moment seems to respond to your thoughts. The atmosphere changes. The air becomes lighter. It is in this space that true communication happens. It's not magic, it's attunement. Jung described this as the power of symbolic intention. When the physical gesture becomes the vehicle of the psyche, the lost soul doesn't need grand rituals. It only needs to be remembered with love and clarity. Prayer, when born from the heart and not from obligation, transforms into living energy, a luminous bridge between dimensions. But there's a detail that few understand. Praying for the soul is not about holding it back, it's about letting it go. When we say, "Stay with me," it remains tied to the emotional field of the bereaved, torn between the desire to move on and the need to console. We must say the opposite. "Go in peace. I release you." These words, spoken consciously, act as keys. They open the passage, dissolve the fear. Jung stated that the psyche reacts to truth as the body reacts to oxygen. When a soul hears the permission it awaited, something is illuminated within it, and mysteriously, something is also illuminated within us. But what if the soul doesn't want to go? In certain situations, there is resistance. A young man who had lost his sister in an accident recounted that he always felt her presence beside him. The room exuded the perfume she used to wear, and old songs would start playing on the radio by themselves. At first, he found it comforting. Then he began to feel constantly tired, as if something was draining his energy. While talking to a spiritual advisor, he heard advice that would change everything. "She's not visiting you. She's trying to continue living through you." That night, he said aloud, "I love you, but you need to go." He cried himself to sleep. The next morning, the house was silent. No smell, no music, just a profound peace. Sometimes to love is to let go. These episodes show that the boundary between love and attachment is more delicate than we think. Jung saw attachment as a prison built out of fear, the fear of no longer being whole without the other. But when we let go, love doesn't dissolve. It expands, transcending form and becoming presence. Therefore, conscious communication with the dead is, in essence, a dialogue with eternity. No voice is needed, only intention. Mentally saying, "Go, I release you," has the power to break the energetic bond that keeps the spirit tied to the earthly plane. But there is something even stronger than love: forgiveness. It acts as both fire and cure. Many who have passed carry unresolved guilt, wounds that continue to bleed on the other side. And the most surprising thing is that forgiveness, when genuine, transcends any distance. A man, after years of resentment over his father's abandonment, decided to write a letter that would never be sent. In the text, he said what he never had the courage to say in life: "I forgive you for not being what I expected. I hope you forgive me for hating you." He burned the letter, and as the ashes rose, he felt a lightness he hadn't experienced since childhood. That night, he dreamed of his father smiling. No words were spoken, only the gaze and the feeling of closure. Jung would say that the symbol of fire operated the psychic transformation, converting guilt into understanding. But what if forgiveness is impossible? What if the pain is so old it seems to have become part of the blood? In these cases, time needs to do what the heart cannot yet. Even so, a small opening of compassion is enough. It's not about absolving, but about understanding that everyone acted with the level of consciousness they possessed. Forgiveness is the purest form of liberation, both for the one who grants it and for the one who receives it. The bond dissolves, and what was once a wound becomes a passage. Jung saw this as the highest point of individuation, when the human being understands that there are no enemies, only mirrors. As these practices become part of life, something changes in the very perception of death. It ceases to be the end and becomes a transition. The tears that were once of loss become tears of reverence, and it is in this state of surrender that the most improbable experiences occur. There are accounts of people who, after praying for the liberation of a loved one, felt a luminous presence pass through the environment. Not a physical apparition, but an intense vibration, a warmth that seemed to embrace the entire body. It lasts seconds, but leaves a peace that no words can describe. Jung would call this a manifestation of the self, the momentary encounter between the individual soul and the totality. But what if this contact is the beginning of something bigger? A retired professor recounted that, after months of praying for his deceased wife, he began having dreams in which she taught him concepts he had never studied. He wrote everything down and, upon researching, discovered exact correspondences in ancient philosophical texts. "It was as if she continued to educate me," he said. The collective unconscious, according to Jung, possesses access to all of humanity's symbolic knowledge. Perhaps upon being freed, his wife's soul became a channel for this wisdom. The boundaries between worlds are not barriers but permeable membranes. These experiences show that the relationship between the living and the dead is, above all, pedagogical. The dead teach us how to live. They taught the professor to learn without fear. They taught the young man to let go. They taught the woman to recognize care in silence. Each liberated soul returns a fragment of light to human consciousness. Jung stated that the unconscious incessantly seeks totality, and that is what death tries to show us, that nothing is truly lost. It only changes form until it is understood. But one mystery remains, and perhaps the most dangerous of all. Some who try to help end up being sucked into the process itself. There are accounts of people who, by becoming too involved with spiritual rescue, began to feel a constant presence, as if they had attracted more to themselves than they could handle. Jung warned, "He who awakens the unconscious must be prepared to be awakened by it." This means that, by coming into contact with the invisible, we are also observed, touched, transformed. There is no neutrality. Compassion must be accompanied by discernment. Once, a young woman tried to free her grandmother's soul with daily prayers. After weeks, she began to dream that they were both trapped inside the same house, banging on the windows without being able to escape. The dream repeated itself until she realized she was praying out of attachment, not love. On the night she finally said, "I let you go," her grandmother smiled at her in the dream and disappeared. The cycle was complete. The risk of rescue is the same as that of healing. If done unconsciously, it becomes a prison. Helping a soul, therefore, is also a form of self-knowledge. Each lit candle illuminates not only the path of another, but also one's own shadows. Each sincere prayer dissolves something within the one who prays. Jung believed that the collective unconscious responds to the symbolic gesture of love as a cosmic echo. Goodness is never lost. It reverberates. And perhaps that is the true purpose of everything, to discover that in saving another, we are, in fact, saving ourselves. But there is something no one expects. When the heart learns to let go, the universe responds with one last sign. And it never comes from the outside. It comes from within, like a memory that doesn't belong to this life, like a voice that says, "Now you are ready too." And at that instant, the line between the world of the living and the world of the dead completely dissolves. What remains is silence, and within it, a promise of revelation. Because the journey, as Jung taught, never ends. It only changes direction. And what is about to happen in the final part is not a farewell, it's the awakening. Everything said so far converges on a single point, and it pulsates within you at this very moment. There is no real separation between what lives and what has departed. What we call death is merely a change of language, a displacement of consciousness to another plane of the same existence. Jung said that the human spirit is a river that knows no banks. It flows, changes course, but never disappears. So too is love. It traverses time, flesh, oblivion, and always returns to its source. Now you know, it is possible to help those who have departed, not through complex rites, but through the simplest and most profound of forces, that of an awakened heart. When you understand that you can offer light to those you love, something within you changes forever. Love ceases to be a feeling and becomes a conscious action, a gesture that alters realities. Think of someone who has passed away and who still lives within your memory. Perhaps this person needs at this moment something that only you can give: permission. Say mentally with tenderness and courage, "I love you, and therefore I let you go." These words are keys that open invisible portals. You are not speaking to the past, you are speaking to eternity. But the transformation doesn't just happen on the other side, it begins here. When you learn to let go, the weight of absence transforms into a subtle presence. Grief becomes learning, pain turns into wisdom. Jung said that every loss is an initiation. It teaches us to see with the eyes of the soul, and not just with the eyes of the body. That's what we're learning. To continue loving without needing to possess. To continue remembering without needing to retain. When this understanding blossoms, the fear of death begins to dissolve, and the meaning of life expands. You can begin now, without ceremony, without waiting for the ideal moment. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. Imagine your loved one surrounded by a soft white light that vibrates from within. Mentally say, "May you find peace, may you follow your path lightly, and may you know that the love between us continues." This simple practice has the power to change destinies. Jung believed that psychic energy follows the direction of thought. What is emitted with love reaches, and what reaches transforms. But there's something even deeper. When you help a soul cross over, the universe responds. Small synchronicities begin to appear, a perfume that appears out of nowhere, an old song playing at the exact moment, a dream that brings peace to the heart. These signs are not coincidences, they are confirmations. It's the invisible world's way of thanking you. And if you pay attention, you'll realize that this gratitude doesn't just come from the other side, it comes from within. The soul you help is, in part, your own soul freeing itself from the chains of guilt, fear, and finitude. There is also an unexpected effect. Life around you begins to change. You become more sensitive, more attentive to gestures, more patient with the pain of others. You begin to see the world as a living network where everything that is healed in one place reverberates in all the others. Jung called this mystical participation, the state in which individual consciousness recognizes itself as part of a greater whole. Every prayer, every act of forgiveness, every word of love spoken with sincere intention contributes to the balance of the whole. What you do for a loved one reverberates in thousands. But what if each of us were, without realizing it, a guardian of the crossing? Think about it. Perhaps the meaning of being alive is precisely this: to help those who came before and to prepare the way for those who will come after. Death does not interrupt the flow, it only amplifies it. When you light a candle, when you forgive, when you tenderly speak the name of someone who has passed away, you are participating in an invisible work that keeps the universe in motion. You become a bridge, and being a bridge is the noblest way to exist. Some people claim to have felt this change almost physically. One woman, after months of silent prayers for her deceased brother, dreamed of him smiling by a riverbank. He simply said, "Now I can cross." Upon waking, she felt that something had also crossed over within her, an old fear, a rigidity, a resentment. It was as if both had been freed together. This is what Jung called the alchemy of the soul, the process in which the transformation of one being reverberates in the transformation of another. But what about us, who are still here? How do we apply all of this to everyday life? The answer is simple and immense at the same time. Live as if each gesture were a prayer. Treat others as if they were souls on a journey, because that's what they are. Listen, forgive, embrace, say what needs to be said. Helping a dead man find the light is noble, but helping a living man find meaning again is equally sacred. Jung stated that the unconscious speaks through human relationships. Each encounter is a mirror of what needs to be healed. What you do with love, you do in the name of all worlds. And if, in the end, death itself is merely a return home, then all of life is a long journey of remembrance. Every soul you free, every pardon you grant, every tear you transform into prayer, brings you closer to that primordial memory. Everything is connected, and love is the only language that is never lost. Now breathe and allow this thought to become true within you. The love you feel for those who have passed has not ended, it has only changed form. Continue speaking to them. Continue sending light. Continue forgiving, remembering, and learning. Because each time you do this, you also heal. And when your own time comes to cross over, there will be no darkness, only recognition. You will see beloved faces, hear familiar voices, and understand that nothing you have lived through was in vain. Everything was part of the same story, the story of the soul discovering its infinity. Jung said that death is the deepest awakening of life. When it arrives, you will not leave. You will simply open your eyes to a world that has always been here, waiting to be seen. If this journey touched you, if it awakened memories, peace, or courage, let it manifest. Share your experience in the comments, even anonymously. Write the name of the person you wish to free. Send a prayer. Tell us what you felt. Every word here will be a spark of light that will help another soul find its way. Like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe to the channel to continue exploring with me the mysteries of consciousness, life, and death through the profound vision of Carl Jung. Turn on notifications, because the next journey will reveal what happens when a soul finally awakens and returns to its origin. Remember, love doesn't end with death. It changes form, crosses worlds, and continues to work through you. And perhaps at this very moment someone, somewhere, is feeling that light arriving.